two applications running on two different processes of same computer can share information between them. We call this mechanism as distributed computing. Actually, distributed computing is nothing but, suppose we have two computers. So generally, this is the server and this is the client. And on server, one application is present. So this is server application. And on client, another application is present. These two applications can share information between them. These two applications can share information between them. They can share information between them. This is managed by using, we call this mechanism as distributed computing. Distributed computing. We call this as distributed computing. Not only that, another point is, in one computer, you may have two applications running. These two applications can share information between them. These two applications can share information between them. They can share information between them. They are running on same machine in two different processes. Computing. Middleware plays a key role in this distributed applications. We call this as distributed architecture. So middleware is responsible for handling communication. So in distributed architecture, there are so many distributed computing technologies. Actually, there are several distributed computing technologies used by various softwares. We have distributed computing technologies like CORBA, Common Object Request Broken Architecture. We have like RMI, Remote Method Invocation. We have DCOM, Distribute Component Object Model. Actually, these are used in different technologies. EJB, Enterprise Java Beans. We have web services. We have remoting. All this comes under distributed technologies. Actually, CORBA is known to almost 16 languages, more than 16 languages knows CORBA. RMI, Remote Method Invocation, it is used in C, C++ like languages. DCOM, Distribute Component Object Model, it is used by VB like languages. EJB, it is used by J2EE, so Java. So web services is known to all technologies. Python, PHP, everyone uses these web services. .NET uses by name remoting and all this. There are several distributed computing technologies. The main purpose of these technologies is to share information between computers in a network. And for that, middleware plays the key role. And we call this as, that means middleware. Middleware allows to configure and create an API. To configure and create an API. So that can handle communication. So between client and server, that can handle communication between client and server. Middleware allows to configure that. It allows to configure that. We will see how it configures that. So that means for that, first you need to understand this heading I will give as distributed computing. And what is distributed computing and what is the role? That means now what you have to learn is how to create an API by using this middleware, how to handle communication between client and server. Let's see. So for that, first you have to install middleware. Already yesterday I showed you. Install Express. After installing, now first step is creating a server using middleware. Creating a server using middleware, so that server can handle the request from the client and send the response. Earlier we created a server in Node.js. Why we have to create a server? So here in middleware, the problem with Node.js is it is single threaded, and it is single threaded and it is asynchronous. Asynchronous is advantage. Single threaded is a problem. Handling multiple requests simultaneously at the same time will be difficult for that Node.js directly. That's the reason not only Node.js, any server-side technology have to depend on a middleware. Every server-side technology uses different middlewares. We are using the middleware Express. So this allows you to create and configure the server so that it can easily handle the requests from the clients. So how you create a server using the middleware, how you configure the server. So how to manage that? So let's see how we can configure and create and define the middleware. So first step, so to configure the server, already we installed Express in the last session. So let's create a new file, server.js. Okay. Now here we have to import Express library, where Express is equal to require Express. We are importing this Express library. After importing, you have to create an app. You have to create an application. So I will create an application where this application will use Express. That means we have to assign this Express. And application requires a port number. You have to tell. Directly you can mention. So port, on which port number? Suppose I given the port number some 3000. You can give any number. So I given some 8080. So because 8080 is default port number, several applications may be running on that. You can give a different number or it's okay for you. So I'm defining the port number. Now I need to start the server. How do we start the server? So that means we need to just define app.listen. Listen on which port number? So we have to use the port. So port. So listens on the port number. And we will use a callback function. This callback function will return the message. So console.log. So saying that server listening at, and we will give http:// so localhost or 127.0.0.1 $. I will access that port number here, whatever the port number. You can directly give the port number or you can store in a variable and use it. So this is generally how you configured the server. But server is ready, but it is not ready to accept the request from you. So, and handle the request from you. To access the request and to handle the request, generally, server requires a concept called routing. By using this routing technique, It indicates how it can handle the request from the client. It is listening, but it is not ready to handle the request from the client. Server started. You see now how to run. So open the terminal. I will open in a separate browser, command prompt. And here we say, so node, so server.js. And it says server listening at this port number. Now let's launch that http://127.0.0.1:8080 and enter. You see it says cannot get, because it doesn't have any routing configured. Server started, but routing is not there. Routing is a very important concept used in web applications to handle the request from the client, process the request, and send a response. Server is ready. Server is ready. Routing is not ready. So we configured the server. So this is how we create the server using middleware. So we configured the server by using the middleware. So we configured the server. This is server. And I will give this name as server.js. Okay. In this, we have to write this code and we need to run this from the command prompt. So node server.js. That's how we run. Run, you know how to start it. Now, very important is server is ready. It is listening on that particular port number, but it is not ready to handle the request from you. So for that, we need a very important concept called routing. Actually, routing refers how an application endpoints respond to the client request. Actually, in simple terms, routing is a technique used in web applications to handle requests from client. Routing is a technique used in web applications to handle the request from the client. That is general. Technically, so routing refers to how an application's endpoints, we call applications endpoints. Applications endpoints, that means you say URLs. Endpoints means the URLs, application URLs. So respond to client request. Respond to client request. Client request. That is the point. How application respond to client requests. So that means we need to define the routing. Routing specifies how it can respond to the client request. Actually, generally we call this as a technique used for handling requests from the client. So this technique can handle so many requests. So that means usually the request for client from client, request from client is classified using various request methods. Request methods like you have get method, we have post method, we have put method, we have patch method, we have delete like methods. So these are very commonly used methods. The request from client is classified using various request methods. Get method means, so it is used to fetch data from get is used to fetch data from server. And post method is used to submit data to server. Post method is used for that. Put method is used to modify the all details. So patch is used to modify. It is used to modify. So modify partial details, not all details, only few details. And delete is used to delete the details. So, or you can say delete the data like that. This is actually frequently used routing methods. So generally, the most common methods are this. Yes. Technically, how the methods are going to handle and the work, that's what we are going to see. Actually, the HTTP methods, we technically call these are referred as usually they are referred as HTTP verbs. Actually, HTTP verbs, we call them HTTP verbs, but generally people call them as HTTP methods. So we have verbs, we have technical point, that is verbs. Usually these are used for handling various interactions. These are referred as HTTP verbs also. Now, how the concept works, that means how you define, how you configure these methods. Generally, for that, we have to configure like this. How do we define these methods? App uses the method. App uses the method name. So app uses the method name, and it uses a path, and it uses a handler. That is how we define. So the path and handler. So usually app is the instance of server, that is your express. Method indicates the HTTP verb. And generally get, post, these are the methods. And path indicates path on server. Handler indicates the function that is executed when the path is matching. That means here app is nothing but it refers to server. So that is express actually. It refers to express. And method is actually it refers to HTTP verb. HTTP verb means get, post. Path actually it refers to path on application, path on server. And handler is nothing but it specifies a function. It specifies a function to execute. It specifies a function to execute when path matched. When path is matched, it specifies the function to execute. Actually, how this concept works, a small architecture point you need to understand for that. Means how this is going to work. A small architectural point you need to understand. Generally, architectural point for this is, suppose you see, actually we have this is from the client, how the request is handled, how the request is managed. Actually, we will have a web server. This web server is also called as, we also call this as HTTP server. HTTP server, web server, or we call this HTTP server. Yeah, our application is present on this server. Our application is on the server. We have our application on the server. It is on the server, application is there. So application have various resources. Application will have various resources. Like it have home, like it have about, like it have contact. So many details may be there. So some options are there inside the application. Now what happens is, when the request comes from the client, the request comes from the client to the server. The request comes from the client to the server. This request will be processed in the server at a location. Generally, this is handled by, this request comes to HTTP processing pipeline, we call as pipeline. HTTP processing pipeline. The request comes to the server's HTTP processing pipeline. In this pipeline, we will have a HTTP handler. A HTTP handler. The role of this HTTP handler is to handle the request from the client. That means process the request from the client. Whatever the request comes, it will process the request. After processing the request, this will use a routing engine. It will use a routing engine. We will have a routing engine. This routing engine is responsible for, the handler will use the routing engine. And what this routing engine will do? This routing engine is actually responsible for verifying whether the requested path is available. So the requested path is available in the application. Generally, what application will do is, actually, application will prepare, application is going to prepare, it prepares a route table. Application prepares a route table. In this route table, it will contain the information about the path and the resource. That means in which path, which resource is present and how to serve it. That information is present. It's a table. It contains the path and resource. Path like /home. That means it has to get home. Like /about. So it should get about. Like that resource name and the path name. This routing engine will verify whether that requested resource, the requested path is available or not. If the requested path is available, then it will pick that resource and it will send that resource back. And it will send that resource to the client. It will send the resource to the client. It is going to send that resource to the client. Resource to the client as a response. That means client will get that as a response. That means everything is managed. Request and response is actually managed by this routing engine. That means what application will do, if the path is matching, then it will load that component. So if it is home, it will load that into the, it will load that into this That means if it is matching, it will load that component into the application and it will send that as a response. That means it will pick up, it will load, and it will send as a response. So this is the background process, how it works. So when the request comes, it will be processed by HTTP processing pipeline. This HTTP processing pipeline will take help of a handler, and it will use an engine called a routing engine. The responsibility of routing engine to verify whether the requested path is available in the application's route table or not. If it is available, then pick up and send it. If not available, that means actually this routing will send status codes. 200, that means okay. 404, that means not found. Like this, it will send the request message. So based on that, the status will go like not found. So it's available, all that. This is basic how the process is handled in a routing engine. So this is what happens in the background at basic level. So routing is very important to handle all this process. It is very important to handle all this process. That means managing the request from the client, processing the request, and sending the response. So generally, how you write the request, let's see. That means server is configured. How do we write the routes? So here we need to define routing. Routing is defined by using app.the methods. The method is get method. Get method's intention is for fetching the information. We will see the methods, all the methods, we will see how it works. First, we will see how this get method works. Get, post, put, delete, different methods. So I am writing the method here, get. And in this route, so it is asking the name, path name. Usually path name / indicates user is not requesting anything. If user is not requesting anything, then the callback function will come. This callback function contains two objects, request object and response object. You can give full name. So now response object have to send response to the client. Currently, we will send an ordinary message. That means response.send. What message? I will simply put that. So request for home page. So request for home page. So or simply this is index page. That means if user is not requesting anything, we have to send the index page. How to send the index page? We will see that. Currently, we are just sending the message first. Okay, this is the route. How the route can be configured? App.get. Another route is I defined / suppose I said home, and function, and we have a request and response. And here we will use response.send. So this is request for home page. That's what I given. Similarly, you can have any number of requests. App.get, it is /electronics, something like this. And a function, and here request, response. And in the callback, response.send. Here we said, so request for electronics page. That's how we define. Later we can send those pages. So according to the request. Now, if user is not requesting anything, it will be like this. If user is requesting, so any specific, we need to send that specific. we need to define the path in this way, configuring the path in this way. Actually, when you are defining the routes, usually when you are configuring the routes can also handle wildcards. We call it as wildcard routes. It can also handle wildcards. That means you see here, I'm using app.get. I say, so slash, so C asterisk T, like this. And function, so request and response. So request and response. And here we are defining, C asterisk T means it's a regular expression, right? That means starts with C and it may contain any number of characters. Asterisk means many characters. And T, that means ends with T. Not regular expression, it is wildcard. Wildcard means asterisk is used for many characters. Any character and many character. If I use question mark, it is one character. So asterisk is for many characters. This is response.send. Here I will say, so you requested, so some say contact page like this. So that means it is a wildcard. So wildcard route, just roughly example. That means route may match with any specific character, then it can access and it can display. This is how generally the routes are configured. For GET request, we define. For the GET request, later I will show you post, put, delete, how to do that. So for the GET request, the routes are ready. That means now application is ready to accept the request from client. But these are the paths configured. Now you see, once we start the server listening, and you go here, and I am not requesting anything, just port number, and you can see it gets request for index page. So by default, the path is accessing the index page. And here at the top, I defined /home. That means it is request for home page. If I say here electronics, so it says request for electronics page. And if I say some contact, so that is wildcard page. If I requested something which is not available, so fashion, then it says cannot get fashion. Actually, later, because not all technologies, some technologies have the ability to configure the wildcard routes asterisk. It uses a callback function and response.send. So response, it is using request object and response object. Response.send. So I just defined something. And here, it's not for every, some applications will support that. That is called wildcard route. That means if you requested something which is not available, then it is not found. We can create a not found option. That means simply double asterisk indicates you requested something which is not available. Then you can put detailed message saying that, so page you requested, not found. That is the message. That is wildcard route. What is the advantage of that is, I will compile this. What is the advantage? It says it's not found. That means if anything you requested, by default it says I can't get. Actually it shows an error message. Instead of showing an error message, we can display a friendly message. We can configure a friendly message and define a friendly message. That is basically done. So generally, how we can manage and handle the instructions. So usually when you are defining the path, That's how generally we configure the wildcard routes. So this is basic routing. But here we are handling only GET request and we are sending some messages. So we are just configuring the GET request. So here, let's create an example now. That means create route for handling GET request. So the main purpose of GET request, GET is used to fetch information from server, fetch information from server. So in this, there are several points. So it refers to a path using slash. It refers to a path using slash. And it allows to configure wildcard routes so that request can be processed when path mismatch. So that is wildcard routes. So we use asterisk for not found. So that is basically done. Example, so server.js, in that this is the program. So this is for handling various requests. Now you can test this. We can test this by using from the browser. That means here, test the following URL. So what are the URLs? http://127.0.0.1:8080. What this is going to do? This is going to get index. So http://127.0.0.1:8080/electronics. That means get electronics, like this, electronics. And suppose we configured another path. So that is we configured another path, and the path is like, and this is the path. Okay. And this path is like contact. So that means it is for get wildcard. And anything you defined and it is not found. That means you defined something like fashion, which is not there. That means get not found. That's what it is going to manage. These are all different types of URLs that we are testing for handling that. This is generally how we can handle the GET request. But not only that, here some more important points are there. So what are the points here? Generally, so the points configured here is when you are dealing with the GET request, the request is not just only path, not just configuring the path. So we can also have the path defined with parameters. We generally call them as route parameters. Remember, this is all about GET request only. You configured the route for handling various contents. Generally, route can configure route parameters. Route can configure route parameters. Route parameters allow to access a specific content directly from the URL. That means you can have some data. It can return only that particular data from that particular URL. For example, earlier, so route parameters, we need to define a lot of query strings. That means actually parameters are used to query data directly from URL. Actually, so early days, so early web users query string. So the applications that are using routing technique, they can use route parameters. I will show you. Early web uses routing uses query strings. How it looks like? Actually, it looks like this: http://www.amazon.in/electronics.some page, JSP, PHP, Python, any pages, server side pages. In this page, question mark, category is equal to electronics. Category is equal to mobiles. And ampersand, model is equal to multiple query strings. Model is equal to Samsung. Like this, we need to define. That is, even today, several websites still use this query string. But now route parameters make this very simple now. By using route parameters, it will be like this: amazon.in/electronics/mobiles/Samsung. That will be more simple. Earlier, we have to use a lot of query strings. Now we can just use this route parameters. It becomes more simplified. This is what the modern web technologies are using, this routing technique. These are called route parameters. So that means inside that electronics, you want some more details. That's how we can fetch. Now here you need to understand how the route parameters are passed, how the route parameters are accessed and used, how the parameters are passed, how they are accessed and used. That means how do you configure the route parameters? That's important. Generally, to configure and work with route parameters, so we need to define the parameters. So we need to configure the parameters. So let's see how we can configure the parameters. So in the application, generally to configure the parameters, so we have to use :/:. That means we need to configure in this way. So you can configure. So you can configure the route parameters. You can configure the route parameters in path. By using the following syntax. Syntax will be like this. Actually, you can just use app.get. In that / you define page / param1, parameter 1. Again / param2, parameter 2. Like this, you can add any number of parameters and you use a callback function. And this callback function will have a request and response object. You know that. It uses a callback function. Now, this callback function uses a request and a response object. Now, how we can access these parameters? Actually, to access the parameters that are passed. So the request object provides params. It provides params property. property, actually params object, params object that gives access. So gives access to all parameters and values, parameters and values. Actually, params is a object with a key and value collection. You can access the parameters by using this param collection. We can access specific parameter, or we can access all the parameters. We can access all the parameters. So that's how we can manage. That means, you see, this is very important for querying the information, because later I will show you with the database how the querying works with the database and how we can manage that. So what we need to do here is, for example, these are all not required now. Already we saw that. I will give this index page is there. Okay. Now I'm giving app.get/products. So, or we will say details. Details is the path. Here we are expecting /ID is parameter, /name is another parameter, /price is some parameter. We will use a callback function. Now, request and response. Now, important is here, the important point is the details. The details cannot be accessed directly now, because details is expecting parameters. Every parameter defined inside the path is mandatory. Every parameter defined in the path is mandatory. So every parameter defined in a path is mandatory. Mandatory. That means you must pass a value. You must pass a value. So we must pass a value. Otherwise it will return not found. You must pass the value. So that means here you see, so we have to collect these parameters. I will use response.send, request.params. Request.params, it will send all the parameters. Let's see what is this params. Params is an object, as I already told you. You see, it is requesting all this. And you see how it presents now. I will compile this again. Okay, and started. I will request here details. I am not request anything, index page will come. I will request details. So details, then it says cannot get details. Because details is expecting parameter, you have to pass the parameters in the URL. That means / passing the parameters is done with /. That means you are configuring like this. And how do we pass that? http:// so localhost, so your port number, and in that param1, so param1 parameter 1 value, so param2 value, like this. They are configured with colon, but when you pass, you have to just pass that. That means it will have the page and the parameters. Now here you are passing like that, details /ID is 1 and name is some mobile and price is some 23,000 and it can access and display. You see, it returns an object. So params is an object. It can pass that. You can access any specific calls. You can individually present that. That means I want to present all the details separately. Like, then I can present in whatever the way you want. So I am defining like I'm defining like name. That means I want to present the name. So and so ID. That means I said ID is equal to $request.params.id. That is the ID. Now here you are trying to present, suppose in multiple lines you are configuring, trying to present in multiple lines. Accessing and presenting, I'm just using BR. That means line break, because we are presenting in a browser, and see name is equal to $request.params.name. So we have to use the name parameter. And in the next line, price is equal to, so request.params.price, that is the parameter. Now you see when you are passing that, so compiled, and here we are passing that. So details /101. And I said some Samsung TV and price 45,000, and it should get the details and display. In the URL, directly it allows you to pass the queries. Actually, what we do is we collect them, and by using that, we can communicate with the database, get the data that is matching with them, and return only the data. That I will show you now. So that means in the next level, we will see how this is going to interact with the database, get the data, and return the data. That means you entered product ID. It should search for that particular ID, and it should return the data. From an API, it has to do that. From an API, it should do that. For example, see here, this is general details. So suppose we have seen fake store API, fakestoreapi.com. In that, see, their methods are like that only. So they defined get method of products. You see the URL, it says /products. So /products is going to return all the products that we can do now. We will see that how to do. Then another option, they have products one. See, that is the parameter. This parameter is fetching only that one ID related product and displaying. This is route parameter. So that means there can be one parameter, there can be multiple parameters. For example, see, here also I'm writing like this, app.get /shopping and a / so ID, I given like this, shopping ID. Now, when I pass that shopping ID and so let's, that means /:ID, okay. And here we defined a function. So this is request and response. And here I need to send this response. That means you see here, response.send. Actually, response have a lot of options, I will tell you. Actually, it should not send. It has to redirect. Response.redirect. Redirect to which path? We have to define the path. Path is http:// so fakestoreapi.com/products / in that we need to pass that ID. It should redirect to that location. That means we are collecting the parameter and we are redirecting to that location. Response have a lot of methods. We will discuss those methods now. In the next point, we are going to understand response.send, send a response. This redirect will go to this API, search for that product ID and display. You see now here, actually, once you configure this, let's compile and see. And it is listening, and you see here I am requesting details. It's not details, it is shopping. In shopping / I said 2, then second product information will come. But very important here is, so it says that ID is not defined, because here we have to access that by using request.params.id. That is the request parameter ID. So we need to get that request parameter ID and compile that. So let's run this again. And you see, I'm requesting this again. So it should get the data from that API and return the second product information. You see, from our application, we are making a request for an API and fetching the data and displaying. So this route parameter is working fine. So route parameter is working fine. That means it is able to connect with this API, send the query and get the data and display the data. Like this, it should interact with our database, get the data from our database, and it should use it. It should use it. This is the basic approach. So this is one simple point to handle the parameters. Now, how these are used to communicate with the data in the backend, get the data from the database and return the data. Now we have to learn how the API connects with backend database, how it can fetch the data and returns the data, how it can query, how it can access and manage the data. That is very important. Connecting with the backend database and interacting. That we will see in the next session. Tomorrow we will discuss about that. Okay. This is too many points we learned today. So you need a practice for that. Okay. Once you are good with this, then we will go to the next level, which is very major level. In this next level, we have to understand how to communicate with the database and get the data. With that, our backend application is ready. Then in the front end, we have to communicate with that. How to communicate with the data. So that is important. That we will see in the next session. Tomorrow, we will discuss about that, right? You need to practice this all. Then tomorrow, we can continue with communicating with the database